Assalamu alaikum. Alhamdulillah, salatu salam ala rasulillah, amma ba'd. As you guys are aware, we've finished Umdah al-Ahkam for what we need to do for this year. And Umdah al-Ahkam is basically a book that Abdul Ghani al-Maqdisi, rahimahullah, collected after people asked him to collect a book on Hadith, which talk about Fiqh and Ahkam. So the Umdah refers to the most important or the principles, and Ahkam are the rulings. And he authored this book, as we saw in the introduction, many lessons ago, that some people had approached him and they've asked for him to compile something in Hadith. So he's done that. And all of these hadith are based upon Bukhari and Muslim. He came from a Hanbali kind of background, so even though the hadith are talking, are not biased towards a particular madhab, but his chapter titles and his understanding in other books are all Hanbali based. So that's basically an introduction, and what he has done in this book, he's collected roughly around 500 hadith. And we've stopped in this semester at roughly at 160, I believe, something around about a third. And that stops us at the end of Salat. And from next year, in the first semester of year 2, we'll start from Janazah and going on forward from there. So this book will take a period of 3 years for us to cover. So this is basically the introduction. And what we're going to do today and next week's session is go through the 100 and something hadith that we have covered in this semester as a revision. And what we want to do is not try and go through a lesson again. The point is that we're not going to study it over again. We're going to go through some of the benefits that you guys can share yourselves about the particular hadith and the particular chapters that we've got. But the main thing that we need to focus on before we start this revision class for this week and next week is that what we want to do is look at the understanding, not look at all these other fringe and side benefits. So for example, if we take hadith number 1, the book of purification, he starts with the book of purification, but hadith number 1 is the hadith of Niyyah. What does the hadith of Niyyah actually mean? I mean, like we've said, we can talk about many different benefits from this hadith, but what's the crux of the matter? What's the actual hadith? What's the meaning? What's the purpose? What's the objective? Right, okay, so exactly that. So now he's begun with hadith number 1, that your intentions need to be sincere, and that's how your actions will be accepted. Therefore, it's the first hadith in the book. Do we need to add anything else to that? We kind of understood the hadith. And this is what we want to do and what we want to establish throughout this revision class. We're not going to be able to study 14 weeks worth of material in 2 weeks. It's not going to be possible. But there's a lot of benefits. There's a lot of things that maybe we haven't understood and that kind of stuff. So that you can go over the audios again and try and benefit. But the main thing behind any book, whether it's this one or any other book that you study, is that you have to understand what the text is actually saying and what the author is trying to get across. That's the main thing. And all these other side benefits that you could get, that's going to be something which supplements and complements the book. But what you need to do is walk away and say, okay, look, I've understood the book of purification, I've understood the 8 or 9 hadith that he's got there. Therefore, whenever you look at hadith again independently, you know what the meaning of the hadith is, let alone all the other side benefits. So the meaning of hadith number 1 is that the Prophet ﷺ has said that your actions depend on your intentions. If your intentions are sincere, then you will be rewarded. If not, then you won't be rewarded. And it's as simple as that. Okay, hadith number 2 here, we have the hadith of Abu Hurairah. The Prophet ﷺ said that Allah doesn't accept a person's prayer if he's broken his wudu until he makes wudu again. So here we're talking about the book of purification, yeah? And this is the book of purification, and he's not done a chapter. So there's a difference between a book and a chapter. What's the difference between a book and a chapter? What's the difference between book and a chapter? So here, he's began with a general book of purification. Yeah.
There's chapters within the book.
Chapters within the book, yeah, but why? What's that distinction? Yeah.
Sections.
Why?
Different topic.
So this is a different topic which is specified. So this is a different topic altogether, and this is the general topic. So this is now he's talking about tahara in its general sense. So now he's picking out, these are hadith, which he is saying in a general sense, this is what you need to understand when it comes to tahara. So hadith number 2, what do we learn from hadith number 2? What's the point of hadith number 2? Okay, so you need to have wudu, you need to be in a state of purity for your salat to be accepted. Yeah? What about your dua? You can make dua without wudu. What about recitation of the Quran? What the Prophet ﷺ here is clearly talking about the salat. And there's other things that we know you need to have wudu for, but here we're talking about purification before the salat. Hadith number 3 is the hadith of 3 companions who have narrated that the Prophet ﷺ said, "Woe to the heels from the fire." What does that mean, woe to the heels from the fire?
Make sure you wuzu is done correctly.
Right, okay, so now we have hadith number 3 here. Wudu must be done correctly. Hadith number 2, what did we say about hadith number 2? Yeah. Salat, accepted. And also we learn from this also that there are things that nullify your wudu. Okay, so those are the 2 main focuses, hadith number 2. There are things that are going to nullify, so you need to learn those things. And if that eventuality actually occurs, you need to make wudu. Hadith number 3, how do you make wudu? You make wudu by doing it correctly. And there's another hadith in Sahih Muslim, where the Prophet ﷺ saw a man, and he left a coin size of skin which wasn't washed, so he commanded him to go back and make wudu properly and repeat the prayer. So this clearly shows that it needs to be done correctly, otherwise he wouldn't have commanded him to do that. On the authority of Hurairah, hadith number 4, whoever does wudu, then let him rinse his nose. Whoever does istijmar, let him use an odd number. When any one of you wakes up, let him wash his hands 3 times before he places his hands in the water vessel to make wudu, because none of you know where he has put his hand whilst he was sleeping. Another narration, he should rinse his nose also before he puts his hand into the vessel. If anyone performs wudu, then he must rinse his nose. What do we learn from hadith number 4? And those other versions have been put in there because of a particular understanding. So what do we learn from hadith number 4?
Every morning when you wake up, you should rinse your nose and rub your mouth.
Okay, so the majority have said that you should wash your hands. You should wash your hands and your nose. Wash hands and nose every morning. Every morning. How do we know it's every morning of sleep and not every sleep? Because the Prophet ﷺ said, when he wakes up, he doesn't know where his hands have been. And the Arabic terminology that is used here is talking about the night sleep, not a nap. So here, washing your hands and your nose is recommended when you wake up every morning. But the Hanabil, like we said before, and there's a reason why he's put those narrations in there, is that if you have a vessel, you wake up in the morning, if you have a vessel that you need to make wudu from, you can't put your hands in, you can't just dive in there. But the majority say no, it's all mustahab, that you wash your hands and you rinse your nose out. But they've said that you must wash your hands and your nose before you start making wudu. But that's their opinion there. Okay, we're going to look at istijmar in a minute also. Hadith number 5. So what we learn from hadith number 4 with its additional narrations is that what you need to do is remove any kind of impurity from yourself before you want to go through the process of purification, because the hadith also has talked about istijmar. Yeah? So whoever wants to make wudu, let him rinse his nose out, and whoever does istijmar, let him use an odd number. So here, what we're talking about is removing impurity. Remove impurity before you want to become pure. I don't think we mentioned this before, but purification in the Sharia has two aspects to it. Okay, it has two aspects to it. It has raf al-hadath, which is talking about spiritual impurity. So now, for example, I don't have wudu, but I'm not pure Islamically, because for me to pray, that is. So now what I need to do is remove spiritual impurity and izalat and najasa. So then here what we need to remove physical impurities, and those two make up tahara in the Sharia. And that's what hadith number 4 is teaching us here. That if you wake up in the morning, make sure you wash your hands and your nose to remove number 2 before you do number 1. Yeah? But they didn't mention gargling. This hadith of the Prophet ﷺ said that the shaitan stays in your nose, and this narration here is that you don't know where your hands have been. So that's why they've said that it's an obligation. But the point here, hadith number 4, we learn from it is, okay, so hadith number 2, there are things which will nullify your wudu. Number 3, you need to do wudu correctly. And number 4, there are things which are actual impurity and spiritual impurity, and you need to learn those things also. So that's why all of these are put in the introduction of the book of purification. And all of this will be expanded as the book goes on in its separate chapters according to their level of topics. And now, as you can see, there are different topics here. Hadith number 5, Abu Huraira, the Prophet ﷺ said, none of you should urinate in stagnant water which is not flowing, then wash from it. What do we learn from this one now?
The types of water.
Excellent, the types of water. The types of water. Some of it is stagnant, some of it is running, and all of that has a different hukum. You have a lot of water, you have a small amount of water, you have running water, you have non-running water. All of it has different rulings. And unfortunately here in this book, he didn't actually give a separate topic of the chapter of waters. And you'd find that in all of the books of hadith to my memory. But he hasn't got one of those. But we talked about it slightly in Tayammum, and I think we might have to revise that as well also. Hadith number 6, authority of Abu Huraira, if a dog licks the vessel, then you should wash it 7 times and make the first one with earth. So what do we learn from that one? Again, we're coming back here, and is that impurities are of levels. Okay, so now you have wudu, and then you have, so we've seen, you have the light one, you have the medium one, and you have the heavy one. The light one, for example, is when you need to sprinkle. The medium one is when you just need to either do one of these 2 things. So either you make istinja or... So I'll just say tahara in a general sense, because tahara here we're referring to both of these 2 things. But then you have the heavy one, which is things like dog licking, and you have to go through a process of purification. So hadith number 6 teaches us that there are different types and levels of impurity. Hadith number 7, the Prophet ﷺ said the same thing. You have to make the 8th time with soil, on the authority of Humran, the freed slave of Uthman. Hadith number 8. So let's say hadith number 6 and 7. Is that one there? Hadith number 8, and this is now the way the Prophet ﷺ made wudu. Uthman radiallahu anhu called for some water, and then he washed his hands 3 times, then his mouth and nose, and then he washed his face 3 times, and then his right elbow or right arm to his elbow 3 times, and then the left likewise. Then he wiped his head, then he washed his right foot up to his ankle 3 times, and his left foot likewise up to his ankle 3 times. And then he said, this is how I saw the Prophet ﷺ make wudu. And whoever does that and then repeat or follows it with 2 rakat of optional prayer with khushu, then Allah will forgive all of his previous sins. This is Bukhari Muslim. So here now 8 and 9 also we're looking at the sifat of the wudu. So how to make wudu. And here we have certain terminologies that we talk. So I think wudu is quite well known to all of us. Alhamdulillah. And here he's saying there are some slight differences, which has talked about the madmada and the istinshaq and the istinthar being done separately. What's the madmada? Do you remember what the madmada is? Madmada is the gargling. What's the istinshaq? Sniffing up the water into the nose. And the istinthar is releasing that from the nose. Okay? But besides that, I mean, the wudu was pretty much the same. He took more water out of the vessel and he washed up to his elbows. And we had somebody demonstrate, more than one person actually demonstrate the wudu when we were looking at that. Do we need to re-demonstrate the wudu? What do you think? Should we do it again? Sami, where's Sami? Sami's not here today. Hadith number 10 is reported on the authority of Aisha that the Prophet ﷺ used to like beginning with the right in everything. When he used to wear his shows when grooming and when in cleaning. Okay, so when he used to wear his shoes, when he used to comb his hair, when he used to comb his beard, when he used to apply perfume, all of these things he used to start from the right. What do we learn from Hadith number 10?
Right is better than left.
Right is better than left. Okay, so what do you mean by that? Start from the right. Excellent. So number 10 basically shows to us that the Prophet ﷺ used to like to start from the right. But what does that mean then? What hukam do we get from there? It's sunnah, start from the right. So if I started my wudu from the left, would that be okay? Would it be valid? It would be valid. That's what we learn from this here. Hadith number 11, authority of Nu'aym ibn al-Mujmar, that Abu Huraira said that the Prophet ﷺ said, surely my ummah will be labelled as the white-faced horses on the Day of Judgment because of the remnants of wudu that they will come with on Yawm al-Qiyamah. So whoever is able to exceed in making wudu, then he should do so. In a version reported by Muslim, I saw Abu Huraira making wudu and he washed his face, and then when he went to wash his hands to his elbows, he washed all the way up to his shoulder. And when he was washing his feet, he was washing not just up to his ankles but up to his calves. And then he explained why he did that. I heard the Messenger of Allah saying, surely my ummah will be labelled as the white-faced horses on the Day of Judgment because of the remnants of wudu. So whoever is able to exceed in it, then they should do so. And some of the ulama have said, I mean here he's talking about the virtue of the hadith, but the rest of it is Abu Huraira's understanding. So some of the ulama have said that it's permissible for you to exceed in making wudu. But the correct opinion, as we saw, is that all of that is from the ijtihad of Abu Huraira. Abu Bakr didn't do it, Umar didn't do it, Uthman didn't do it, Ali didn't do it, and the Prophet ﷺ himself didn't do it. So had it been something which was prescribed, then we should do it. But the ulama have taken this addition of Abu Huraira washing up to his shoulder and up to his calves with a pinch of salt, so to speak. Hadith number 12 on the version, a version reported by a Muslim. I heard my beloved friend, so Abu Hurairah saying again, I heard my Khalil saying that the beauty of the believer reaches wherever his wudu reaches. Again, it's talking about the virtue and how some of the ulama have said that you can exceed based on the encouragement from the Prophet ﷺ. Because this is the general understanding that they've got, that he's telling us to make our faces brighter, make our limbs brighter, make ourselves brighter, so that we're prepared for Yawm al-Qiyamah. Okay, so that's the book of purification, that's the introduction, those are the first 12 hadith, and then he's moving on to another chapter, which basically means another topic, and now we are here talking about the etiquettes and the manners of going to the bathroom. Can anybody share what they remember from 1340? Have you got your notes with you? You have. Okay, so we have 5 hadith from 13 to 18. Anybody want to mention anything?
Jinn is in the bathroom.
Okay, good.
And it's good to make supplication.
Okay, so hadith number 13. So this is chapter of relieving oneself. I'll just write bathroom here. And what we got with hadith number 13 is that we need to make dua before entering. So like we've seen here, we have a dua which we say because we fear for the impurities. Now these impurities, we can be either be khubth or it could be khubuth. What's the difference between khubth and khubuth? So now khubuth like that, or you can be khubth like that. And this is referring to the male jinn, and this is referring to the najasa. So what we learn from hadith number 13 is the Prophet ﷺ used to make this application, but we are also recommended, because now here we're talking about, the spirituality aspect of these hadith. There's no doubt about that. It should increase our iman and make us better people. And, there are many hidden secrets and wisdoms and inner perspectives that we can get. But because this is a revision course, or revision class for this week and next week, we're just looking at the Ahkam. And what we want to do is just summarize what we are learning here. So this hadith here is teaching us that we should protect ourselves from impurity. Hadith number 14, we should be respectful in the way we do that. And one of the ways we do that is we do not face the Qibla if we are out in the open, or turn our back to the Qibla if we are in the open. But if we are within a building, then it is permitted for you to do so. And that's how we combine hadith number 14 and number 15. And 16 if you like. Yeah? Because now we have the hadith of Anas bin Malik as well. So let's put 16 in there also. Have to bear with me with my handwriting. Hadith number 17, Abu Qatada, that the Prophet ﷺ said, none of you should touch your private parts with his right hand whilst he's relieving himself, and he shouldn't wipe himself with his right hand, and he shouldn't breathe into a vessel. Hadith number 18, the Prophet ﷺ passed by two people who were being punished in the grave, and one person didn't used to protect himself from his urine. So what do we learn from 17 and 18? It's a major sin for what? Okay, so not to protect your hygiene, being negligent in it. Not preserving tahara in both of those senses that we were just talking about. But we also learn that the right hand is noble, and it would be makruh for you to use it in something which is not noble. And we also learn from here the etiquette of cleaning oneself. How do you clean yourself? So now we have water until all najasa has gone. And if you have to wipe, then this process is called istijmar. If you have to wipe, as we saw in the hadith that came before, you need to do it with an odd number of times, and that would be mustahab. Yeah? I think we've done this before. So for example, if a person has to wash, then he would just basically wash himself until all the najasa is completely gone. And then that's it, he's clean. If a person needs to wipe, so say he's got a piece of tissue like that, then he would do an odd number of times. So he'd have to wipe it until the najasa is gone. It is possible now, in those days, you used to have different faces of a rock or a stone, so they used to turn it around. So the ulama have said that the same thing would apply to this kind of material. That if you use a wipe here, you can use another wipe somewhere else, and you can use another wipe somewhere else, and that will be included in the number of wipes. But using an odd number, for the majority of the ulama, is mustahab, and it's not necessary. What is necessary is that we do this. That's the crux of the matter. So you could wipe yourself, you could have a bit of najasa there, or on your son, or on your young daughter or something, and one wipe would take it completely away. It's possible, because, they're defecating less. So the whole point here is that we are preserving, and we are not being negligent. And here we have the manners of doing so. You wouldn't use your right hand, you would use water, you would use material that would actually help you remove the najasa away. And you have a number of times that you would do that to ensure that the najasa has been removed. So this is basically what we have learned from the etiquette of going to the bathroom. Yeah? Can we move on? Any questions? Okay, so now we have the next chapter, which is the chapter of siwak. Anybody want to share any light on what they remember from siwak?
It's not the actual stick itself, it's the hygiene.
Okay, excellent. So that's basically the definition of what we're talking about here. So the chapter of siwak. And a lot of the ulama, including the explainer Sheikh Saad and many of the other ulama, have said that siwak refers to a verb, which is the action of you doing that. So if it's an action, then it's talking about your dental hygiene and not an actual stick itself. Even though using that stick would be better, and it has different virtues in itself, it brings about a lot of khair, and you're following the sunnah, etc. But if you are using dental hygiene, if you're using mouthwash, flossing, if you're cleaning, look after your mouth, that is the objective. It doesn't make sense that you have a stick, you don't know how to use it properly, and your teeth are not, your mouth is not looked after, because the Sharia wants you to preserve your body. Okay, so now here we have Hadith 19, 20, 21 and 22, which talk about the siwak. So Hadith number 19 is Hadith of Abu Hurairah. The Prophet ﷺ has said, had it not been too difficult for my ummah, I would have made it obligatory for them before every salat. Another narration says before or during every wudu. What do we learn from that? Why has he put that hadith there, the first one? The importance, but also the ruling. Yeah? What's the ruling? Does anybody say that siwak is wajib? The hadith, Bukhari and Muslim. You'd find a very strange opinion saying that it probably is wajib, but majority of ulama are saying that it's mustahab. Mustahab. Okay? Hadith number 20, authority of Hudhayfa bin Yaman, that the Prophet ﷺ used to stand for the night prayer, and he used to brush his teeth before he used to do that. 21, Aisha radiyallahu anha was resting with the Prophet ﷺ when he was passing away, and he asked for him to brush his teeth, and he brushed his teeth, and then she described that that was one of the last actions that he actually ever did, and that he passed away between my stomach and my bosom. Another narration, her brother came into the room and he was staring at the siwak, and he nodded with his head that this is what he wanted, and she made it easy for him, and they washed it and they made it soft so he could benefit from it before he passed away. Hadith number 22 is the hadith of Abu Musa al-Ashri, who said, I visited the Prophet ﷺ when he was brushing his teeth with a fresh siwak, and I could hear him making the noise of as if he was about to regurgitate, and he was going up his tongue when he was doing that. So what do we learn from 20 and 21? Because those two have a separate message to 22. 2021, what do we get from that? Yeah, Faisal.
The virtue of approaching good deeds with it.
Excellent. This is the objective here. Good deeds, and that the Prophet ﷺ himself didn't like foul smells coming from his mouth. So if that's his normal state, so how would it be when he's about to meet his Lord in Salat, or reciting the Quran, or actually going and passing away? So the point that we learn from this is that the Prophet ﷺ used to take it very seriously, despite it being mustahab, and it's recommended for the believer not to smell bad and not to look bad, and preserve his appearance and his hygiene, etc. And especially when you're doing good deeds, because here we have in 21 before he passed away, and hadith number 20 before hadith number 20 I'm referring to. Hadith number 20 is where he used to do it before the Qiyam al-Layl, and 21 is before he actually passed away. And some of the ulama have actually even said that even before you recite the Quran or do any good deed, even if it's dua or dhikr, then you should make sure that your mouth is clean. And 22 we learn is the manner of doing it. So when we are brushing our teeth, we will go sideways, and when we are brushing our tongue, you go the other way. Okay, so that's the chapter of siwak. Any questions? The chapter of wiping over the khuf. And there's only 2 hadith here. And here the wording of the khuf has been mentioned. So I'll just put that here. Chapter of khuf. But the hukum actually applies also to anything that is similar to the khuf. So it includes socks, and it includes shoes, and even tights. I asked that question to Sheikh Wasiullah. What do we do about tights? Women wearing tights. And he was saying that if it's exactly the way that the sock is, but it goes all the way up to their waist, then the point here is something that is too difficult for you to take off. So why are you wiping over the khuf is the same reason why you're wiping over these things. Some of the ulama have said the reason why we wipe over these things is because of, number one, difficulty in you taking it off and removing it over and over again. But some of them also have said that it's something that you walk in, so it's attached to your foot, so it's removed itself. If it's something that you can't walk in, then that is not a khuf, or it doesn't take the ruling of a khuf. And that's the opinion of a lot of the ulama. But what seems to stand out is this one. This is the opinion of Ibn Taymiyyah and many of Ahl-Hadith. And they've said that anything that is on your foot that fulfills the conditions of being khuf, just like tights, for example, if it could be something else tomorrow, then even shoes now, like we said before when we were explaining it, shoes weren't the way shoes were back then. Yeah? Yeah, there are conditions, don't get me wrong, but we're talking about why do you wipe. If you understand why do you wipe, is it because of difficulty, or is it because it's an extension of your foot or a replacement of something that you're walking in, then it would affect the outcome of the ahkam. But the conditions, I think we're going to look at that now, of wiping over something. Hadith number 23 is the hadith of Mughira. The Prophet ﷺ said that I was traveling with the Prophet ﷺ, and he went to take his khuf off, and the Prophet ﷺ said, leave those khuf, because I entered in the state of purity. Hadith number 24 is the hadith of Hudhayfa, who said I was with the Prophet ﷺ when he was relieving himself, and he performed wudu, and then he wiped over his khuf. So what do we learn from 23? 23 and 24, very different here. What do we learn from 23? Are the conditions. Yeah? So what are those conditions? If I'm resident, I can't. So I think what you basically mean that there's a time period. It has to cover the ankle. It has to be permissible in itself. So it can't be made from, donkey leather, for example, or pig leather or something like that. It can't be suede from a haram animal, for example. So if you're wearing a sock or a shoe, then it has to be permissible for you to wear that shoe. The time period, the ankle, and that's it really. And making sure that you wipe over it correctly up to your ankle. So this ankle here is talking about the height. Another thing that we mentioned before is that it has to stick to your foot.
It can't be too thin.
Stick to your foot. Water can't seep through. I'm very sorry about my handwriting. I'm just getting tired. But here, conditions is that the time period. So what's the time period for the resident? 24 hours. Yeah? When does that 24 hours begin? So now, I've gone to the bathroom, I wash my feet, and I put my sock on. Does it start now? No. When does it start? First time I wipe. Some of them said is when I lose my wudu. So say, for example, I've done wudu, put my sock on, a minute later I went to the bathroom again. Some of the ulama said that that's when it begins. But the correct opinion is, as Umar radiallahu anh said, and it's the opinion of many of the madhahib, is that it begins from the first time I wipe. So now I'll leave them on, and then I'll go home, and I'll wipe over them. I want to pray again. So say I do that at 11 o'clock. I've got until 11 o'clock tomorrow night to keep them on. I can wipe over them as much as I want. It has to reach up to my ankle. Why? Because a general principle is that if something is being replaced in the Sharia with something else, then it takes that same ruling of length and duration, etc. It has to be permissible in itself, because obviously you can't wipe over something which is najis. And the wiping has to go up from the toes up to the ankles, and we demonstrated that in the lesson, remember also. It must stick to your foot, and this is something, one of the elders in our masjid couldn't understand either. What does that mean, stick to your foot? And the best way I could explain it to him at that time was that at that time you had khuf and you had shoes and you even had jawarib like what we are wearing now, but they also used to cover their feet with other things which wouldn't stick to your foot. So it wouldn't be something that wraps around the limb. It could be, for example, I'm feeling really cold and I'll just wrap myself in a blanket so my feet would be covered. And I could be in that state for a very long time. That would not be permissible for us to wipe over because it doesn't take the hukum of it being a khuf, because it's not something that is worn around my foot. But now we have some socks, and maybe even some khufs, I don't know, maybe even some khufs, they don't actually stay up, they go down maybe. That wouldn't affect it. So that's not what we're talking about. And it can't seep through. Now, there's a difference between seeping through and absorbing. There's a difference between seeping and absorbing. Some of the people have said that it has to be waterproof. But like we said that when we were studying it, that even the Hanafi madhab himself don't believe it to be, Abu Hanifa himself didn't say that it has to be waterproof because he wiped over normal socks before he passed away. But some of them said that it has to be waterproof. There's a difference between it being waterproof and cotton or wool absorbing that water. So if I'm going to do wudu right now and I wipe over my socks, if it's not gone directly through to the skin, then that's not seeping through. But if a few minutes later you can feel the wetness, that's because the actual sock itself has absorbed the water that I've used to wipe over it, and that is what is going through. You see the difference? But what we're talking about seeping through is if that I'm wiping over and it's just like I'm wiping over my skin. It's gone directly through. Maybe like some tights are that thin that it would go straight over. These are some of the conditions that I can think of. I don't know if there's anything else anybody wants that. Yes, sister. Does it matter? No, because the wiping here is what is the objective. Some of the ulama have said that it doesn't even have to be your hands. It could even be a stick that you use for people who can't bend down, for example. So what you would do is you'd start from your toes up to your ankle. As long as you can do that, it could even be Fahim doing it for me, and then I've got my wudu. It could be somebody else. Yes?
When you put them on, you have to have wudu.
Yeah, okay, yeah, good one, yeah, okay. That's the most obvious one, is that you need to have wudu in the first place. So, purity. Okay, any other questions? If it's see-through, no, it doesn't matter, because as long as it's stuck to a person's foot, then that's fine. And he's wiping over it, and that's fine. Some of the ulama said that it can't be see-through, including Abdullah Jibreen, rahimahullah, and others from the ulama. They said that if you can see the skin through it, then it's not allowed. Imam Nawawi said that even if you had a sock made out of glass, hypothetically speaking, then it's permissible, because it's still the same ruling as a khuf. The transparency doesn't matter. This is where the khilaf comes from. If it is something which is walked in like a shoe, and it's attached to your foot, then that's what they've attached the hukum to. Others from the ulama said, no, it's talking about difficulty. So if you've got something, even if it's transparent, as long as it fulfills the conditions, then you can wipe over it. So something which is see-through, they would say, then that doesn't resemble a khuf. It's not something that you would walk in, because it would, get worn out very quickly, etc. That's some of the conditions there. Hadith number 24 teaches us that the Prophet ﷺ wiped over his khuf after going to the bathroom. And this teaches us that the nullifiers are the same as wudu. So you would treat wiping just as you would treat wudu. And there's another narration of Safwan al-Assal that he said that we were commanded to wipe when we wake up from our sleep and go into the bathroom, etc. Okay, hadith. Any questions so far about wiping, siwak, anything? Now we have a chapter which is talking about how to clean discharge and the likes. So again, here we're talking about removing najasa. And this is half of tahara. So here is how to clean. Hadith of Ali, who said that I used to be a young man and I used to get a lot of discharge. And I think that here what we're talking about is discharge in particular. So let's change that and say it's discharge, because now we're talking about things that are leaving your body. And what is the ruling on those things that are leaving your body? So he's saying that when he used to be a young man, he used to have a lot of discharge that used to come out of him. and he was shy to ask the Prophet ﷺ, so he asked al-Miqdad ibn al-Aswad to go, and the Prophet ﷺ told him to wash it and to make wudu. Okay, so hadith number 25. We have muddy, we have money, and we have wadi. Yeah? This is najis, and this is najis, but this will need istinja or istijmar only. And it would nullify your wudu. Okay? So this one is something which is omitted out of your private parts. It could be because of desire, it might not be out of your desire, but it's something which comes out. And the difference between this one and this one is that this is desire based and this one is not. But the ruling is the same. I mean, some of the ulama class them as different types of discharge. And this one is semen. Okay? And this is for both genders. And for this one, you would need to do ghusl. Hadith number 26. There was a man who complained to the Prophet ﷺ about feeling that he's got discharge. What did the Prophet ﷺ instruct him? To act upon what is certain or likely. Not, this is the key word here, not what he thinks has happened. If he has a doubt, if there's something which is unproven, if there is, a very small kind of a thought saying that, okay, something's come out, or that kind of, that's irrelevant. Because there's no dalil. Not thinks, what he thinks which has no evidence or no likelihood to it. So the Prophet ﷺ instructed him that if you feel something in your belly, that doesn't necessarily mean something's happened. But that's what his mindset was. I can feel something, that means I've broken my wudu and I need to go again. And the Prophet ﷺ said, don't cut your prayer until you are certain that you've heard a voice or a sound, or you've smelt something that's come out of you. And you think now that is likely from yourself, because it could be from somebody else. But now here we're talking about, the ulama have said that ghalab al-dhann takes the hukum of it being yaqeen. So if you feel that something has happened and you think that there is reasonable doubt, you have evidence for it, and you think in yourself, okay, actually I think something has come out, that's only the time when you would act upon it. If it's a feeling, or if it's, then you ignore it. Hadith number 27. Okay, so hadith number 27 is like what we talked about before, about the child who urinated in the lap of the Prophet ﷺ, and hadith number 28 is the same thing. But hadith number 29 is talking about an adult who is urinating. So now here we have 27, 28 and 29, which is talking about how to clean discharge. So now cleaning discharge can sometimes be sprinkled, and sometimes it would need to be washed. The sprinkle here, we're talking about a child or a boy who is not eating yet. And it can also be for wadi. So if a person is here and he thinks that there's been some discharge, he doesn't necessarily need to wash it. Some of the ulama said that he has to wash it, but if he thinks that he can't actually see anything but he can feel it, what he would do in that scenario is sprinkle and make wudu. He wouldn't need to make istinja. That's hadith 27, hadith 28, and hadith 29 now is talking about when it actually needs to be washed. So this man, he came into the corner of the masjid and he started urinating, and the Prophet ﷺ didn't sprinkle that area, he actually washed the najasa off. Hadith number 30 is the Prophet ﷺ talking about tahara and how it's from the fitrah. And that includes sometimes something physically being removed from your body, but sometimes it would be a limb or an organ being removed physically from your body, but sometimes we remove things that which keep coming about. And that's all for the sake of the chapter title here, how to clean yourself from things that are coming out of your body and the likes. Okay? Major impurity. Any questions so far? Yes, Ibrahim?
Is there many tahir if it's on the floor?
Okay, good. Okay, so what's the ruling on this one? This is najis, but we didn't say that it was tahir, and we said that this is pure when we were studying it. Some of the ulama have said that it is not pure, but the correct opinion is that it is pure because of the hadith that will be mentioned here. And also another narrations where Aisha said the Prophet ﷺ used to pray with it being on his garment, and she used to try, scratch it off. And he used to go out and lead the people in that state. Okay, any questions? Yeah?
The ruling on circumcision, is it
What's the ruling on circumcision? Okay, so here the Prophet ﷺ said there are 5 things which are from the fitrah, and the ulama have said that each and every one of these have a separate hukm in itself. So the circumcision itself, the majority of the ulama for men, is that it is wajib, but for women it is mustahab. But again, we know from the Sharia is that it is from a merciful Lord, and if it is difficult for a person to do that, then that obligation would be removed until it can become made easy for him. But when it comes to removing the pubic hair and trimming the moustache and the nails and plucking the armpit hairs, etc., and other narrations say there are 10 things which are from the fitrah. The ulama have said that these things are mustahab, it's not wajib. Some of them have said it's wajib, but the majority of ulama have said that it is mustahab for you to do so. Yeah. There is a narration which says 40 days. Some of the Salaf have said it should be less. There's a narration of Ali radiallahu anh said that he used to he used to cut his nails every 10 days because they used to grow back quite rapidly. The ulama have understood this to mean that it's mustahab because there is no sin connected to it. The Prophet ﷺ said that they're from the fitrah, and it's not something that he directly commanded people to do emphatically. So they've said that it's mustahab. Chapter of, yeah.
Another hadith says cleanliness is half your deen, so
right.
you combine it with the 40 days and you leave it.
Yeah, but we're okay, so how do we combine the Prophet ﷺ telling us that cleanliness is half of your deen? Again, cleanliness here is number one, talking about mustahab. Because there are certain things which are wajib, and that is what you're going to be questioned for. Things which are not wajib, then you're not going to be questioned for. If you do them, then that's from your own goodness. That's number one. But the other thing is that cleanliness has 2 aspects to it. And one of those aspects is the spiritual. So half of your religion, meaning you are spiritually pure, you are not in a state of najasa, you protect yourself from najasa spiritually and physically. But that doesn't necessarily mean that you have to do the mustahabbat. Not saying that you go and let your nails grow, that's not the point, but we're trying to understand what is the hukm. And obviously it's not something which is befitting for a Muslim to not look presentable and not smell presentable and etc. Yes, this is the question. Okay. Yeah, sure. Yeah, go on, Ibrahim.
Is it also possible that circumcision
Yeah.
is wajib for Nisa?
Yes, the Shafi'i said that it is wajib. But the Prophet ﷺ, when he came to Medina, he found some women doing it, and he told them not to do it excessively. So they understood that the Prophet ﷺ didn't command them to do it. He just said, if you're going to do it, then don't do it excessively. But some of the ulama have said that because it's from the fitrah, then it applies to the women also. But the majority of ulama have said that it applies to the men because it is wajib for the men, because Ibrahim did it when he was a very old man. And removing something from the body, which is quite excessive, more than what would be removed if you're a female, clearly shows that, the Sharia would never tell you to chop your part of your body off. You'd never find that. So in this scenario where the Sharia is telling you have to chop a part of your body off, clearly shows that it's something which is very important. Otherwise it can't be mustahab. And there's different arguments that they've used, different dalil that they've used. But the majority have said that it's wajib for men or for boys, or for males even, and mustahab for females. Yeah, can we move on? Chapter of major impurity. Hadith number 31 is the hadith of Abu Hurairah that he said that he met the Prophet ﷺ in the streets of Medina, and the Prophet ﷺ asked him, where have you been? I haven't seen you for a long time. So he said that I went away because I was in a state of major impurity and I made ghusl, then I've come back. So the Prophet ﷺ said, Subhanallah, the mu'min doesn't become impure. What do we learn from that? Okay, well, we've got a chapter title here which is major impurity. And then he's gone with this hadith, the very first one. Huh?
The book of speaking about Usool.
Yeah. So hadith number 31 is the hadith of mu'min la yanjus. So here we have Prophet ﷺ telling us that we go through a period of major impurity, but this is physical impurity. And if you remember what we talked about tahara, it's not spiritual, it's the spiritual impurity that remains intact. The believer can never become najis in himself because he is tahir. But had he came, then it would have been something which was bad, so to speak. Even though the ulama have said that it's mustahab for you not to walk around, in a state of najasa, especially when you go into the circles of ilm, etc., that you go in a presentable manner. But the Prophet ﷺ is teaching us here, not that you can go in that manner, but he's teaching us here that physical impurity may be on you, but you will always be in a state of, permanent spiritual purity if you have iman. إنما المشركون نجس. On the authority of Aisha, when the Messenger of Allah ﷺ used to make ghusl from impurity, he used to wash his hands, and then he used to make wudu. Then he used to put his hands through his hair, making sure that everything has reached the scalp, and he would do this 3 times, and then he would wash the rest of his body. And she also said that Prophet ﷺ and I used to wash from one tub, and we used to take turns taking out water. Maymuna bint Harith. So the Messenger of Allah ﷺ did wudu first, then he poured water over his hands, then he washed them 2 or 3 times, then he poured water from his right and then on his left, and then he washed his private parts, and then he struck his hand on the wall 2 or 3 times so he can remove wherever he had, or maybe just to clean his hands, and then he rinsed his mouth and his nose and his face and his forearms, and then he washed the rest of his body, and then he washed his feet at the end. Okay, hadith number 35, the Messenger of Allah ﷺ was asked. Okay, so let's stop there. So now we have 30, 31, 32, 33, 34. All of that is the description of the ghusl. So we have a variation, but what we would do first, what's the first thing that you do if you make ghusl? Niyyah. Excellent. You need to have the niyyah. Okay, step 1. Step 2. Okay. So maybe to be petty here, maybe you do the dua to go into the bathroom and step in with your left foot. Okay, just being petty. But then once you've gone in, you put the shower on, you put the bathtub, or you get your water ready, and then what? Yeah? You wash your hands. Okay, so you can wash your hands, especially if it's the first thing in the morning. Yeah? And then you would clean your private parts, yeah?
With the left hand though, yeah?
With the left hand. And then, step number 4. Step number 4. Wudu. Step number 5.
Body with water.
Okay, so now you pour water over your body, making sure that it goes to the scalp. I'm just going to put scalp because that should include your whole body. Step number 6, really that's it, you're done at this stage. I mean, okay, we'll talk about it in a minute. But then you would do the right side and then the left side. So you do that 3 times. Start with the right. And that's it, you're finished. But how much of this is actually wajib? when you want to make ghusl. Yeah.
Is it niyyah and then washing the whole body?
Niyyah
Mouth and nose.
and washing the whole body. Everything else, mustahab. And we know that because of a separate narration where the Prophet ﷺ instructed a man to do exactly that. Just pour water over your body, and he didn't describe all these other things. And also we learn from these different variations that the Prophet ﷺ did one thing what Aisha saw, and his other wife Maymuna saw something separate. So there wasn't any set sequence. However, we have a hadith here of Aisha, which is where she was saying that they were taking turns. What do we learn from that? There's also an important point in there. That we used to take turns. Huh? Right, yeah, okay, that's a sub-benefit. But when we're talking about ghusl, what do we learn from that? You can use the same water. Okay, so the water itself has to be clean. So let's say clean water. Yes, Jubaid? You can wash someone else. Yeah, maybe. Okay. But I don't know how you get that from that, because she's saying that we took turns, so he'd be washing himself. But yeah, maybe you can. That is definitely a point. But I'm looking at this hadith directly.
Water's impure at the beginning.
Yeah.
If it's impure, not impure, but if it gets dirty, you can still wash from it. That makes sense.
Yes, it does make sense, but that's a bit tricky because now we're talking, because we don't have a separate section as to what water is and why it's pure. That's why I was saying maybe. I mean, who am I to say that? But it would have probably been better if you had a chapter of water before we was talking about ghusl and wudu and all these other things. But yeah, sometimes if you got, for example, if you got some water, yeah, you got a puddle of water, for example, and you got leaves in it, and you've got a twig in it, and you've got different things in a pot, for example, would that be najis, that water? It's tahir. Some of the ulama say no, you can't do wudu from that because it has to be mal mutlaq. It has to be water which is completely clear, no bits in it at all, something like this. So we would learn something like that. But, if there's a puddle and there's something which is najis in it, then, depending on the quantity, it would itself become najis. But like I said, we didn't study that separately here. But what we also learn from here is that a sequence must be followed. A sequence must be followed. But if that sequence is not there, if there is a long time, then that doesn't harm the validity of the ghusl. So, for example, we know from another narration where the Prophet ﷺ made ghusl, but he forgot to wash a particular part, and then he came back afterwards and he wrung his beard over it, or I think some part of his hair over it, and it got washed again. So there is a sequence, but it's not like the wudu where it has to be one after the other. So now what she's telling us is that had it been something like wudu, so for example, if I wash my hands, and then she goes and wash her hands, and then she'll say, alright, wait for a minute, and she's still washing her hands or something, I don't know. And I'm sitting there and waiting to have a go at washing my mouth now. The ulama have said that if it's been that long that your limbs become dry, or you are doing something else, and then go back to washing the next part of your wudu, then the sequence is broken. But that doesn't exist here. That's one of the things we learn from this one. 33, 34, 35, the Prophet ﷺ said that it's permissible for you to go to sleep in the state of janaba if you make wudu. Hadith number 36. O Messenger of Allah, does a woman need to make wudu if she has an erotic dream? Yes, if she sees water. Hadith number 37, the Prophet ﷺ, Aisha said that I washed the impurity of the thawb of the Prophet ﷺ, and then he would leave Salat while the patch was still wet. Okay, let's do this one at a time then. 35. Is it permissible for a person to go to sleep in the state of janaba? Yes. This here is talking about mustahab, to reduce janaba or eradicate or remove janaba as soon as possible. That's what we learn from it. So if you can't make ghusl before you go to sleep, or before, say you're in a state of janaba, if you can't make ghusl right away, then at least make wudu. That's the point. Because obviously you're going to sleep for maybe a few hours, and then it's going to get delayed. So how about you're in a state of janaba, and you want to, go get an MOT done, for example. It would be recommended now for you to make your ghusl before you go. because you could be there for 3, maybe 5 hours. If you can't, then at least make wudu. Hadith number 36 is when do we make ghusl? When do we make ghusl? When is ghusl wajib? Anybody remember? Okay, so if the money comes out, which is the semen, if there has been contact between the private parts, if a person dies, some of the ulama said for the Friday, I can't think of anything else that would make ghusl wajib. Menses, thank you. Okay, menses and nifas. If somebody becomes a Muslim, then some of the ulama have said that is wajib. But the correct opinion for that also is mustahab. But we know that this is wajib, as far as kifaya, because the hadith of when Zainab passed away, the Prophet ﷺ commanded the women to wash. And the menses is, Allah says, La taqrabuhun, don't go close to them. Contact.
Means just touch?
Touch, yeah. No, as in go in, as in inside. So contact meaning inside. Penetration. Jazakallah khair. Good point. Hadith number 36 has taught us that. Hadith number 37, I used to wash the impurity. Okay, so now, again, this is connected to what Jubayd was saying before, which is where we are here. If something has been washed, is that clean or not clean? Or does it have to be dry for it to be clean? So now, how do we know something has become clean? How do we know that the water itself is clean? So if the smell, or the taste, or the color of a thing is pure, then that hukam is pure. Yeah? And this applies to water, but it applies to absolutely anything. It applies to garments, it applies to a bottle of Coke, for example. Yeah? Bottle of Coke's been left open, you've seen a dog go past it, you look inside and that looks a bit dodgy, it smells different and it's najis. You get the point? If the smell changes, the taste changes, or the colour changes to anything, then the hukam of it could possibly change. Where were we? Hadith number 38. So now here, 37, so now the Prophet ﷺ has had it removed, it's still wet, it's become tahir. Just like we saw the man, the Bedouin, the water was poured over it, that's it, now they can walk on that even if it's wet, because now it's become tahir. You might not want to, but it's tahir. Hadith number 38, I used to scratch the toe of the Prophet ﷺ excessively, and then he would pray in it. So again, here now, what we are learning is another thing which is connected to the chapter of water, which is that, how do we remove impurity? How do we remove impurity? So we can remove impurity by anything which changes these things and brings it back to its pure state. So it doesn't have to be water, but it can be water. But it can be absolutely anything which removes the najasa. And this is the proof for it. There's also other proof. I mean, you could be a bit skeptical in using this as proof, but there's also proof that the Prophet ﷺ, in Masjid al-Nabawi, when they first made it, dogs used to come inside the masjid and used to pass through. You probably won't imagine that now, but that's what used to happen then. So the ulama have said, how could that be possible? It could be that there's najasa there, but the ulama have said that because of the sun, because of things moving and that kind of stuff, it would purify itself. We have many dalil. I mean, the Prophet ﷺ, Abu Bakr said, I walk sometimes barefooted, I might step in something which is impure. And he says the earth that comes after it will purify the thing that you stepped in before. So removing najasa doesn't necessarily... So how do we know something is najis? Smell, taste or colour. I mean, that's just a general description, but you can sometimes just see the najis. This could be something which is najis. You can clearly see it. So you wouldn't go to that then. You just say that's absolute... there's najis there. I can be absolutely certain. But if you're not, then there's smell, taste and colour. Then how would you remove it? You would remove it by water or anything else that would remove that najasa from it. Hadith 39, when a man sits... Okay, so hadith number 39 is proof for that one here. So hadith 39 is proof for contact. Now here we're talking about contact, even if he doesn't ejaculate here, hadith Abu Hurairah, is that once there's been penetration. Hadith number 40 is the hadith of Abu Ja'far Muhammad ibn Ali ibn Hussein ibn Ali ibn Abi Talib, that he and his father were with Jabir, and they asked about the description of the ghusl, and they said that the Prophet ﷺ only used the sa'. What do you remember from this? What's the sa', for example? What is the sa'? It's a measurement of water. How much does that equate to roughly?
4 small bottles of water.
Yeah, so we're talking about a mud is this one. So now 4 of these make a sa'. So amount of water that you'd have in your 2 hands would make a sa'. And that's how much the Prophet ﷺ used to use for his ghusl. But what's the point? Why is Jabir saying this here? Huh? Not to waste water, okay. Hadith number 40 is teaching us that we shouldn't be wasting water. And also that we, like what we saw in the hadith about the person asking about wasawis and hearing stuff, that we should be certain that a small amount of water is sufficient. And this is what Jabir is saying here, that it was sufficient for somebody who has less hair on his body and who was better than you, because if you know that this is going to be enough for me to make wudu, then it's sufficient. You don't need to have excessiveness, because that doesn't create piety. Yeah? Any questions with the ghusl? Tayammum. What's the meaning of tayammum? What does tayammum mean? About halfway through, I've got half an hour left. Tayammum is prescribed when a person... When do we do tayammum? When there's no water, or the water can't be used. And we're talking about can't be used is when there is difficulty in him using that water. So we're talking about tayammum as a substitute for wudu or ghusl as well. Tayammum is a sub for wudu and ghusl. I think some of these hadith are going to explain a bit more. So a man said, why did you not pray? The Prophet asked the man, why didn't you pray with us? He said, I'm in a state of najas. The Prophet described to him what that tayammum, how to do the tayammum. In the hadith, well-known hadith of Ammar ibn Yasir, the Prophet described that you beat your hands on earth, wipe over your right, wipe over your left, and then over your face. Hadith number 43, hadith of Jabir. I've been given 5 things that have been given to this ummah that has not been given to people before us, and that the masjid and the earth has been made a purification for us. So now here we have 41, 42, 43, all saying more or less the same thing, which is talking about the manner and the virtue given to this ummah. How do we make tayammum? First we start with the right hand. First you take earth. I think that's a bit obvious. Okay, let's just put that then. Earth, then left hand. Okay, so then how would I wipe over my right hand? Is it the palm or is it the back? The palm? No. As in, you'd wipe the palm over the back. So the right hand we're talking about, the back of your hand. This is the back. This is what I mean by the back. This is the palm. So when you're doing tayammum, say this is the earth that I've got. So I'd put my hands in the earth, get some earth on me now, and I'd wipe with my left over the. So I'm starting with the right. So I'd use the left palm to wipe over the right back, and then the right palm to wipe over the left back, and then wipe over my face, not just my beard, my face. So this would be the completion of tayammum, and that would be in substitute for wudu and ghusl. But this is now leaving one very important point. When? Can I do tayammum now? No. So now we have some conditions.
No water. Not
Okay.
likely to get it.
No water, and not likely to find any water.
Someone has an illness.
Or let me just put this, you have a little amount of water, but you need that to live. Yeah, so say for example, I've only got this much water, then I would do tayammum. And the thing is, I've got a little amount of water and it's not likely I'm going to get any water anytime soon. I don't know how long it's going to be. It could be months, it could be days or something. Then I would use that water to keep me going and I wouldn't make wudu or ghusl. So you have a little amount of water and you need it. Or you have a sickness, and in that scenario you would do tayammum. And that sickness could be that you cannot let water touch you, or it could be a partial sickness. So for example, if a person can't wipe or wash or do anything to his right hand or his right arm, for example. Say he's in a sickness now, his right arm completely, say it's damaged or he's hurt. It's not got a cast on it. So now it's an open wound, for example. He can't do wudu over that because that would infect it. He can't wipe over that, so he can't do that. So what he would do in that scenario, he would do wudu for the rest of his body, and he'd do tayammum for his arm. So now he'd do the tayammum to recompense for the injured arm. That's tayammum. Anybody got any questions about tayammum? Yes?
After you wipe your hands, do you for the face?
So this is the khilaf. Now some of the ulama have said that there will be two beatings. One beating for the hand and another beating for the face. But the correct opinion is that the Prophet ﷺ here, he beated it, or he beating it once, okay, whatever. But he did it once, and that's the hadith of Umar. And this is the hadith which is the foundational hadith. And this is actually a hadith where Ammar himself reminded Umar radiallahu anh about afterwards.
So before we move on, I just want to say I got no hot water in the wood, cold water, too cold. Can I be doing then or
Can you heat it?
if I can't then?
Can you heat it?
It's possible then.
If it's possible, then you have water. And it is likely that you can get hot water. And it's not a little amount, and there won't be no sickness. If your boiler's gone out, for example, now can you go and warm it up in a kettle? Then you have no excuse. If your boiler's gone out and your electricity's gone out and you've got running water and can you use a little bit of water to make wudu and you're not going to be harmed, then you've got no excuse. You have to go through the process. And I think it'd be very, very far-fetched to say anybody living in the West.
I was just asking just in case.
Yeah.
You explained it well.
Jazakallah khair. Well. Yes.
Coldness or anything like, obviously, coldness, people might get sick after they do something.
Yeah, but that's what I'm asking, isn't it? I mean, can you wait for the boiler to come on? Then you might say, okay, well, the Salat time's going to leave. Then if that's from your own negligence, then you will be sinful for that. You should have woke up 10 minutes earlier. But if that's the case, then you can wait for it then, inshallah, and you won't be sinful. So if you genuinely woke up at, 8 o'clock, and Shuruk is in, 8:05, something like that, 8:04, something, anyway. Say you've only got 3 minutes, and it's going to take about 5 minutes for your boiler to start working, then you have to wait. If you can't make wudu with the cold water, then you have to wait. If there's no other way for you to heat that water up, then you have to wait. You can't go to tayammum because you got water.
Is it permissible to wipe first the face and then the hand, because in the hadith is written like that?
In the Quran it says like that. In the Quran it says wipe your, but the hadith here, the Prophet ﷺ has described how to do it. So some of the ulama said it's flexible, but the correct opinion here is that the Prophet ﷺ explained the Quran. Yeah? Shall we move on?
As soon as water arrives,
Excellent. Okay, so now conditions also is that there is no water. So good. So once water, as soon as it arrives, even if he has not seen it yet, if he knows that there's water just there and he's not even seen it, then that tayammum is batil. So, and even if he's in salat, so there's no water, as soon as it arrives, the tayammum is nullified.
Well, if that's happening halfway through Salat,
You break your salah. Or you do wudu. Okay, menstruation. We're kind of like halfway, or more than halfway where we want to be. Menstruation, hadith number 44, is on the authority of Aisha that she used to suffer irregular bleeding. What's that called in Arabic? Istihada. Good. Istihada. And the Prophet ﷺ said that is not part of your menstruation. Bleeding is not menstruation, or istihada is not menstruation. Irregular bleeding is not menstruation. There are only two things which are menstruation, which is menstruation itself and nifas. And both of them take the same hukum. Anything else, then it's either a vein or something which is similar to a vein, but it's not haid. Hadith 46 and 47, that it's permissible for us to live normally with our female family members whilst they are menstruating, or if they're nifas. Other ummahs used to send their women away, sleep on a different bed, live in a different house altogether, or a different quarter altogether, because they were deemed as being najis. And unfortunately, some of the ulama have actually even said that it's makruh for you to have a woman around you who's in a menses or if she's in her nifas, because the angels won't come near you. But what we have here from this hadith here, the Prophet ﷺ was reciting the Quran whilst his head was in her lap, hadith number 49, and she was listening to the Quran, she was benefiting from the Quran, she was studying, she was living a normal life. 46, 47, she was making food. 47, she was being intimate with her husband, she was sleeping next to her husband. 48, she was touching her husband. She used to even have parts of her body inside the masjid next to her husband and looking after her husband, etc. So that intimacy and that level of compassion didn't stop just because she was menstruating. On the authority of Mu'adha, she asked Aisha, what do you repeat, or do you need to repeat anything if you're menstruating or if you're in nifas? What do we do if she's on her nifas? Maryam, do you know the answer? What do you don't know the answer? Okay, that's fine. I'm sure you'll know the answer one day, inshallah. If she's menstruating or if she's on her nifas, then she needs to make up the fasting, but not the salat. Yeah? Any questions on this? Menses. Salat. Okay, so we've finished purification. Why does purification come before salat? Because you need acceptance. Good. Okay, so here we're talking about a more deeper level, which is ikhlas and tawheed, and removing yourself from any kind of najasa. If you can't pray whilst a woman is bleeding, or if you are in major janabah, then how can you pray if you're upon kufr and shirk and nifaq? That's much worse. That's much worse. So here in this hadith here, a woman might be on her menses, genuinely not know, and continue praying and continue fasting. What should be sinful? No. But if a person continued to pray in a state of doing kufr and shirk and nifaq, and he didn't sort himself out, or she didn't sort herself out, this is the importance of purification. So Allah tells us, فَعْلَمْ أَنَّهُ لَا إِلَهَ. Know and purify yourself, who your Lord is in your tawheed and your ibadah, and then worship. And that's the state that you need to be in. Otherwise, you're not going to benefit. Salat, prayer times. Why does it begin with prayer times? Why doesn't it begin with the sifat salat itself? Because it's one of the conditions. So now here we have prayer times, and it's one of the conditions, and all of the chapters up to the actual sifat salat is where we're going to stop today, is talking about the conditions of the prayer. Hadith 51 is the hadith of Abu Amr Shaybani, who said that the person who lives here, pointed to the house of Ibn Mas'ud, said that I asked the Prophet ﷺ about the deeds which are the most beloved, and he said, as-salat ala waqtiha. Then what? Then being dutiful to your parents, and then what? And striving for the sake of Allah. What do we learn from this? 51.
Is it like the Prophet told certain companions different things according to what? That the Prophet gave different orders to different companions according to what's best for them?
Yes, but here what we learn is that this wasn't something which was specific to Ibn Mas'ud, because the Prophet ﷺ, he said, had I carried on asking, he would have continued to tell me according to that level of virtue. Condition of salah, pray. Good. The virtue of praying properly and in its appointed time. So this is quite clear. So the reason why prayer times is very important is because this is the most beloved thing to Allah. And after purification, this is very important, because it's those people who don't attain purification through nifaq and shirk, etc., will delay their prayers and not, preserve the prayers properly. Hadith 52, hadith of Aisha, Prophet ﷺ used to pray the Fajr prayer, and the women used to attend, and we didn't recognize any of them even after the prayer had finished. Right, when does the Fajr time begin? When does the Fajr time begin?
When the white...
Okay, so now here's the horizon, and there's a whiteness in the sky which spreads, and it's a horizontal one, not a vertical one. So this will be Subh as-Sadiq. And the Prophet ﷺ said in another hadith that it looks like an oxtail or a fox's tail, very bushy, and this is Subh al-kadhib. Right, so this is the beginning of Fajr. This is the beginning of... When does Fajr end? Yeah? Fajr is now ended. Okay, so this is Fajr. When does Dhuhr begin?
When the sun sets, starts having
Okay, so let's say that's there. So where do I put the sun? Here, here, or here? 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 Okay, so when you put the sun here, that's the beginning. When the sun is here, that's the Zawal. And it takes about 10 minutes for it to get there. And now the sun is moving towards its setting place, and now we have a very small shadow. Let's put a shadow here, a very small shadow. And that's very relevant because the end time for Dhuhr is actually the beginning time for Asr. When does Asr begin? Twice as long, I would say, equal one length of the stick. So say there's a stick there. So if there's equal to that length, the time for Asr has begun. When does Asr end? So Asr ends when Maghrib begins, yeah? So now the sun is completely gone. Ignore that tip being there. And the sun is completely gone. That's the beginning of Maghrib and the end of Asr. When does Isha begin? So now we have black, white, red. When this is gone, then Isha has begun, according to the correct opinion. We talked about that and how this affects the prayer times in summer.
Can you repeat it again?
All of it. Well, from the beginning. Book of Purification. Fajr begins when there's a white thread going horizontal on the horizon. You can see it, and it's quite evident. Maybe not now, but definitely in spring, summer, you can see it. And once the sun begins to appear against the horizon, that's when Fajr is finished. And the only salah which is not connected to the rest of them is the Fajr and arguably the Isha also. Dhuhr begins when the sun begins to set. So it's moved on from midday and it now begins to set. Dhuhr continues until the shadow of a stick is not at its equal length. So once it becomes to its equal length, Dhuhr is finished, now it's Asr. Asr then continues until the whole disk of the sun has gone against the horizon. That's Maghrib, and Maghrib will then continue until, once the sun has gone down, you will see the sky change in different colors, yeah? Then it will just become black, white and red. Once all those colors have gone, and it's just black and white, then it's Isha time. So the purple is gone, the orange is gone, the yellow and the green and the brown and all of those colors are gone, and it's just black and white. When does Isha finish? Matter of debate. Some of the Hanabila say midnight, and some of them say until this point, until Fajr. And what I would say is the correct opinion is that midnight is the time where there is a time of darura, which begins. Which is that if you haven't prayed for a genuine reason, then you can pray. But if you are negligent, then that is not good. It's makruh to say the least. But how do we calculate calculate midnight? Was that your question? Okay, 1 second. How do we calculate midnight? So say, for example, Maghrib is at 5 p.m. Maghrib or Isha? Maghrib, because the night has begun, yeah? Maghrib is at 5 p.m. and Fajr is at 5 p.m. So what time will midnight be? In the middle. 11 o'clock. 11 p.m. Sorry, that should be a.m. So become 11 p.m. But you know what? I mean, I've calculated it, and you won't see it go past 12. It's round about 12 o'clock all the time. 12, 12:30, our own midnight. Maybe it might get pushed up to 1 o'clock, but that's about it. So between 12 and 1 o'clock, anyway. Yes, sister?
If your closest masjid
Yeah.
the later time for Asr, should you follow that?
You need to follow what you think is correct. You need to follow what you think is correct. Now, if you know that they're following 2 shadows, which is the Hanafi opinion, then you, to be honest, 2 shadows, this time of year, there's only about 15-20 minutes difference anyway. It's not going to make much of a difference. Do any Hanafis come for Asr here? I think they do, innit? I've seen them, but I don't know if it's I don't know if it's because of their prayer time starting late or not. I'm not sure. I don't know what their timetable says. But generally, in the winter, the day is so short. There's not much in the summer. That's when you see the difference. So we'll be praying at 5 o'clock, and they'll pray Asr like 8:30, which is extremely late. And the ulama have said that's makruh. Definitely, the majority of ulama say to leave the Asr that late is makruh. That's what the munafiqun used to do, and the Prophet ﷺ used to pray when it was still hot. But the point here is, what do you do in the scenario when you don't have, I mean, you know the prayer times, but you don't know how it's being calculated, is it correct or not? Then you need to find a center which is closest to you to find out which one is following in the correct way and you think are trustworthy. But you wouldn't follow a timetable just for the sake of following that timetable. Well, that's what is closest to you or whatever, because the prayer times have to be taken through trustworthy sources also. I'm just looking for a hadith. And now hadith 52, 53, 54, all of that's been explained here. Hadith 55 is talking about the importance, 56, the importance of preserving your prayers, especially in the middle prayer. 57 is talking about how it's permissible for us to delay certain prayers, and the Isha was delayed here in particular. If the prayer has been called, okay, so now we're talking about something a bit different, but there's also hadith where the Prophet ﷺ told the companions, you can continue eating and drinking until you hear the adhan of Ibn Maktoum. And he only makes the adhan once it's been verified, because he was a blind man. It's only been verified for him. So the ulama have said that, and this was the duty of the mu'adhin at that time. The mu'adhin at that time must have been someone that was doing this, because this is responsibility. To go out there, look, once it's done, yes, I'm going to make the adhan now. So he would be up very early, and he'd be the last one going to sleep, so to speak. So it has to be someone that's trustworthy. Yes?
Regarding the combined Salat.
Yeah.
Like in Jummah, and can you play with the Asr?
Can you complete? Yeah.
The Jummah first.
Yeah.
And then play the Asr.
Are you resident? Are you in Leicester?
Yeah.
You can't then. Why would you combine?
Some place in Leicester they do this.
No, that's not allowed. You can't combine unless there's a reason for you to combine.
No,
الذين هم في صلاتهم ساهون. Ibn Mas'ud said that it's those people who are negligent and delay their prayers, and they are known as the munafiqun in Surah Ma'un. But the point that you're making here is that why would they need to delay? The Dhuhr begins at 11:50, and Asr is at 1:30. Jummah takes 15-20 minutes. Why do they need to? It's their own fault. They need to change the timetable. They can't combine. That's not allowed.
And Masjid, take the name, but they played the Jummah, they finish around 1:10, 1:15, 1:10 maybe. And then they play the Asr 1:20, and they said
Asr is 1:35.
Quran Sunnah Masjid, I'm saying that.
Asr is 1:35 beginning, isn't it?
Yeah, but they could wait.
Huh?
That 20 minutes.
1:35. So how can they pray 1:20? That's not allowed. It's not allowed at all.
But he's saying we can combine
No.
for this winter.
Not allowed. Not allowed. No. If the prayer is being called and the dinner is brought, what should he begin with? Hadith 60, there is no salat whilst food is being served. Hadith number 61, some people visited me who have love, mutual respect for Ibn Abbas is saying, and they've said that the prayer, okay, so now Hadith 58, 59 and 60 is teaching us here that you need to preserve your prayers and your prayer times, and you need to plan your day, exactly what he's saying, around those prayer times. But if it comes that it's coincided that, your day has clashed with the prayer time, and if it's going to affect your khushu', then you give precedence to your wealth and your family or whatever, or your job, or wherever it is, to the level of degree needed until that khushu' has been repelled. So here we have food, we have drink, we have all those as examples, but anything that you can make qiyas with on that. So for example, your child is crying and they need the nappy changing. What do you begin with? The nappy, because it's going to affect your khushu. Yes, sister?
What's the ruling for, like, say, a doctor who does surgery for long hours?
Yeah.
Potentially with this someone equivalent.
Yeah, in that scenario, then he would be allowed to combine, but that's because there is a pressing reason for him, because he has basically the responsibility of a person's life in his hands, and that's different. That's different to that scenario, where I don't know why they're doing that anyway. Hadith number 61. People visited me who had mutual respect for, and they said that after these prayer times, so now here we have this one, and this one. What is special about Fajr, Dhuhr and Asr? Connected to them are haram times to pray. Yeah? There's no prayer after the Fajr until the sun has fully set. So now between this and this, you're not allowed to pray. No nothing. Between this and this, prayer is haram. Between this and this, prayer is haram. And that's what these hadith are teaching us here. The virtue of praying in congregation and its obligation. So, bear with me 1 or 2 chapters and we'll finish for today, inshallah. The virtue of praying in congregation and its obligation. Why is it obligation? Because that's the chapter title that he's put, because he's following that opinion that it is wajib. But here, nevertheless, here we have some of its virtues. Can I get rid of this? Yeah? So now hadith of Abdullah ibn Umar, the Prophet ﷺ said that if you pray in congregation, your salat is multiplied by 27. There's another narration that comes afterwards which says 25. Some of the ulama, when we were talking about the explanation of these hadith, we looked at how the ulama reconcile, but the point here is that there's a great deal of virtue. And the Prophet ﷺ in the second hadith 65 is talking about how the angels accompany him, and you'd only get that if you pray in the masjid. Hadith number 66 is talking about how it's a trait of the believer that he prays in congregation and he preserves his prayer, and it's somebody who is not strong in his iman, to say the least, won't be preserving his prayer in congregation as much as he is able, because remember, we have in certain scenarios where the Prophet ﷺ himself would have preferred to do something else rather than pray because of a reason. And even in this hadith himself, he would say that he would excuse himself from the prayer so that other people can pray. And the prayer in the praying congregation can be established. I prayed with the Messenger of Allah 2 rakat before the Dhuhr, and 2. Now here we have 68 and 69 and 70 talking about the sunnah which are rawatib. So again, it's going on from the idea of virtue, and what we learn from this hukum-wise is that you would go to the masjid to establish the congregation. It's a sign of iman for a person to do that. There's a great deal of virtue and reward, and from that is you have your reward multiplied by 25, you have the angels accompany you, your dua will be accepted, you get to hear the adhan, etc. And that we also learn from this chapter here that there are other salats which are not wajib, but they also carry a virtue. So here we're praying masjid congregation for obligatory prayers, but it doesn't just stop there. So a person won't just look at the first hadith from this chapter and think, okay, well, I've prayed in Jama'ah, I've prayed 25 times worth, that's it, I don't need to do anything else, I can just pray 17 times a day. That's not what we're saying here. 68, 69 and 70 is talking about added virtue beyond that. And that virtue can be established whilst you're in the masjid also. The chapter of adhan, here we have 71, 72 and 73. 71, Bilal used to make the adhan in evens and iqama in odds. What does that mean? So he'd say Allahu Akbar, let's say Allahu Akbar, how many times in the adhan? Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. 4 in the adhan. Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah, ashhadu an la ilaha illallah. 2. Ashhadu anna Muhammadan Rasulullah, ashhadu hayya as-salah, hayya as-salah, hayya al-falah, hayya al-falah. Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. La ilaha illallah. All of that's even. But the iqamah would be an odd. So you do Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah, ashhadu anna Muhammadan Rasulullah, hayya as-salah, hayya al-falah. Qad qamat as-salah, qad qamat as-salah. There'd be a series of evens there, but then it'd be odd and odd. So you'd end up in an odd. There's also another narration in the Sunan that the Prophet, that Bilal used to make the adhan long in its, mud and all the ahkam when it comes to that, but the iqamah would be done fast. Hadith number 72. Again, kind of similar to what we've just seen here in the adhan. Hadith number 73 is that the adhan is only established once we are certain that the prayer time has begun. And hadith number 74, that there is virtue in repeating after all of this and making the dua that has been prescribed after that, and the virtue surrounding that. Okay, so again, here we're looking at the understanding, and I'm pretty sure most of this is self-explanatory. But again, if you want to go back to the audio, if you want that, I can give you, if you bring a flash next week. I'm sure there's more benefits that we're skipping over. Here, now, there's another chapter now, so we've had the prayer times. Now we're looking at facing the Qibla, which is now the second condition for your Salat. Or the third one, even, if you want to put purification as the first one. Abdullah ibn Umar said that the Prophet ﷺ used to pray in every direction, lowering his head for ruku and sujood, whilst he was on his mount. And he used to pray the witr in this scenario also, except the obligatory prayers. Hadith number 76 is that the people changed the Qibla, Quba, for Fajr. So they actually were praying facing Sham, and then they, in the Salat, moved to the Bayt al-Atiq, to Makkah. What we learn from this is that facing the Qibla, whilst you are resident, is a must. And you need to exert all your effort to do so. Even whilst you are travelling, you must. But whilst you are travelling, optional prayers can be prayed in any direction. Not that it's better for you not to do so. If you can pray facing the Qibla, etc., then that's also very good. But it's permissible if there is a need for you not to. So say, for example, you're going towards Saudi Arabia, you can sit on your chair in your plane and pray. But what about when you're coming back, you can't turn around? In that scenario, you can pray facing England, because you're a traveller. And this is what the Prophet ﷺ did. But this is not the thumb rule. The thumb rule is you need to preserve this condition in your prayer. The rows and the Imam leading. And that's where we'll stop. Okay, so the rows. On the authority of Anas bin Malik, who said that the Prophet ﷺ used to say, straighten your lines, because it's part of completing your prayer. Straighten your lines, otherwise you will be caused to disunite. Prophet ﷺ, in all these hadith, is emphatically telling us to straighten our lines. How do we straighten our lines? With a stick. The Prophet ﷺ, in the beginning, used to have a stick. With the majority of ulama, the man and the women stand in line according to their torso, their upper body. Yeah. Some of the ulama then have said that you would then attach your ankle and your foot to that of your neighbor and your shoulder to the shoulder, but the majority of ulama have said as long as you're standing in line and the gaps aren't very big, then that has been accomplished. This command here has been successfully become accomplished. So that's one thing. So now we've just talked about men, women and children. How would they stand? But then how do they stand? How do we position them? So normally the group of men would go at the front. So say this is the mihrab, say this is the masjid here, and this is the mihrab, this is where the imam is standing. The imam is standing there. Men will be standing here in their rows, then children, and then women. And that's how it used to be at the time of the Prophet, and this is what we learned from this hadith of Anas bin Malik. Hadith number 80, also hadith number 81, and also hadith number 82 is now then teaching us how people should be lining, even if there's just two of them. And the majority of the ulama say that if there's two people, then there has to be a gap. But what we've seen also from this hadith is that if there's a man standing there and another man wants to come and join him, then they stand in line. Like that. So that's a man and that's another man. And that's what we learn. So if they are forming their row and the imam is in front of them now, for example, that's how they would stand. That makes sense? So this clearly shows that you would stand, and the Prophet ﷺ is standing next to a child here, Ibn Abbas. And the point that's being made here is that he stood in a straight line, not necessarily needing to attach anything to the person next to you. The last hadith, the Imam leading the prayers on the authority, and this is very important here, is because straightening the lines, definitely, obviously, it's wajib. Majority of ulama say it's sunnah. You don't have to do it. It's from the completion of the salah. The Prophet ﷺ has said here, from the completion of the salah. So it makes your salah, it adorns your salah, but it's not necessarily wajib. That's what the majority have said. But the Prophet ﷺ is talking here about disuniting. And if it's something that disunites, then, and it's a command from the Prophet, straightening it, tadilu, etc., tarasu. So it's clearly shown that the Prophet ﷺ used to make emphasis on it, so then we would say that it is wajib. However, if a person differs with another person in the way that you should make it straight, then we shouldn't be too harsh on that. Especially if you've got a masjid like Masjid Tayba or Masjid Taqwa or different masajid where people are not used to coming in. And we've seen this before also when we were doing our studies. If a person comes into the masjid, and they hardly ever come to the masjid, and they come and then people are making it difficult for them to pray there, and they think that they're already coming in with a negative misconception of the masjid. I just had this yesterday where a guy came into the masjid and I was explaining this ruling to the uncle about the foot thing. So then he actually asked, he goes, "Oh, are you talking about normal socks or are you talking about leather socks?" He goes, "I'm actually confused right now." I goes, "No, normal socks." And I could see in his face that this guy now was very uncertain. He was not very comfortable with what we were saying. And I didn't want to have this conversation with this uncle in front of this guy because he's fresh, he's new. I've never seen him before. I don't even know, he could be Shia for all I know. I don't know who he is. But he's coming to the masjid and we need to use hikmah. We need to welcome them. We need to show them that we are trustworthy. So if people are coming to your masjid and you're going to be harsh and you're going to not show an understanding of different people's levels of intellect and understanding, and also legitimate ijtihad, then this is going to create problems. And I've actually heard of an incident where a person, I think it was in Luton, where people actually began to fight one another because of the number of raka'at in Ramadan in the masjid. Physical fighting. How is that Salafiyah? Would the Salaf ever fight another person because of a difference of opinion, ijtihad? Would the Salaf ever speak harshly or insult another person because they are ignorant? Yes, sister, your question?
Is there a ruling about creating rows once the salah has started? Like, if the row is full, and you need to create another row behind, do you need to do it from the middle or the side, or it doesn't matter? You
start from the middle. It was a hadith in Abu Dawood, and there are different narrations where the Prophet ﷺ has said that the Imam needs to be in the middle. So, I don't think the women can see the Imam in most masajid. So then they would just stand in the middle of the room, and that's where they start with their saf. Because the point is the saf needs to be balanced. Last chapter here, I promised, the Imam leading the prayers. Does anyone... So now here we have the Prophet ﷺ, in a nutshell, teaching us 4 things. Yeah? When you are praying behind the Imam, we have 4 things. We have 4 scenarios. We have either... So here, Imam. Chapter of Imam. Either you are going before him. Either you are going with him simultaneously. Either you are going too late, or you are going at the right time. Now this right time is usually, and this is what we see in the hadith, is when the Prophet ﷺ has made the statement or the action. Delaying, what's the ruling on delaying? Makruh, but the salah can also be invalidated if the delay has gone past 1 pillar or maybe even 2 pillars. So it could be stroke, haram. What about before? Major sin. As we see in the first hadith here, doesn't a person fear that his head gets changed into that of a mule? And then this one with him simultaneously is makruh. And here we are talking about action, not statement. So for example, imagine if the imam is saying Allah and he's going down into sajda. And then you start moving. He's not finished his takbir yet, but you start moving following his action. Then you are not with him. You are following him in action but not in statement. What is better for you to do is wait in statement and in action. That makes sense? Because now you are not with him and you're not going before him and you're not delaying. What you're doing is you're left out something which is not recommended, which is that you wait for him to do the statement and the action, then you move. But if he is doing the action, then you are not superseding him. Then that's fine, inshallah. But unfortunately we find nearly all of these with people who pray, unfortunately. But this is the chapter here of praying behind the imam. Bi-idhnillah, we'll finish off the remaining chapters and remaining 80 ahadith next week. Ask Allah to make this beneficial for us all and give us tawfiq. Any questions? سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك لا إله إلا أنت